Put my coffee down.
But you didn't attend
Did not.
Dalton Blue. Okay, okay. So we'll try to take a
I
little
didn't attend
different
it as a student.
Okay, okay,
I used to go there for activities and stuff, but not
Okay.
as a student. Yeah.
okay, okay. All right. Okay. So let's start just by telling me who you are and where you grew up.
My name is Sam Wilson, and most people that I grew up with call me Sammy, and that's my real name. Kind of named after my grandma, Sammy Fristow. And we grew up in Dalton, and the first, I think, 5 years, 4 or 5 years of my life, we lived out in the hills. It was called, we lived on the old county farm out there, and my dad farmed the acreages there for, I think it was primarily R.B. Price. Price was a big family there in the Dalton area, and we farmed most of that land for them. And probably 1950, maybe 51, we bought a place in closer to Dalton, a quarter mile north of Dalton, and that is where we all actually grew up, and my sisters and I, and so forth. We and that was the property that was adjacent to the Dalton Vocational High School. So we had a lot of interaction with the Dalton Vocational faculty as well as students and that sort of thing for the living proximity of where we were. We enjoyed the sports activities, and a lot of our families that lived in Brookfield and Slater and Glasgow and different places of that nature went to school there, and so we were able to meet and talk with them often. My uncles drove a school bus, Uncle Bill, from Brookfield, and picked up students from Brookfield, Marshallene, North Keatsville, and he may have even picked up people in Keatsville, I'm not really sure. And they fondly called him Uncle Bill from Brookfield. And then most of the drivers that drove the buses also were employed there in some capacity as either janitorial or something to do on the farm and that sort of thing. And then they worked there all day, and then picked up the kids and drove them back to their home location and so forth. So it was routed throughout. I think there was the record says probably 19 school districts and I don't know how many counties, but probably 6 or 7 counties within Missouri. And so it was quite up to 55 miles was, I think, the farthest distance from the school location that kids commuted on a daily basis. Right. And one of the memories of busing there was one of the buses evidently that was going up the Graveyard Hill there lost power, and brakes and everything went out of it, and it ended up over in Steinman's pasture. And I don't think anybody was really hurt, but I remember the wreckage over there and that sort of thing. But that was one of the details that the athletics were all outside and didn't have any indoor facilities for basketball or anything of that nature. I do remember they had a tumbling horse, as such, was in the auditorium, and I assumed that they used it for exercises and calisthenics and different things of this nature. So it was there. I used to see it all the time. There was a lot of activities in the old auditorium, plays and dances and that sort of thing. And I remember even after the school was closed, I don't know who it was, but somebody had rented the auditorium, and then after a skating ring on Monday night, we used to go there and dance and have a good time. Teen Town or something like that it was called. Yeah. So it was pretty interesting. It still had the integrity of the old school. It wasn't run down at that point in time. white fence that was around the superintendent's house and that sort of thing was still in great shape, and the lawns and everything were really, really very nice. It was really a environment that caused you to think more globally than just having been right in Dalton, because most of the faculty was from out of state, college educated. They were from Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, and all over. A lot of them went through Tuskegee and so forth. And they brought a kind of a collective intellectual component to a small town that people hadn't traveled much out of. And we used to go there just to ask questions and kind of find out about the rest of the world and what scholars were thinking about, our world and the world events and that sort of thing. So it was kind of what you might call an intellectual nucleus there in Dalton. I remember fondly the track meets and that sort of thing. It was tremendous athletes that went to school there, and they were fast runners, and it was just a real neat opportunity for a young man to go out and have a look at the real good athletes and so forth. Yeah. Many of which came out of Glasgow and different places like that there. And
they had a track there at the school?
Yeah,
really?
The track was located right off the Bartlett Road, west of the actual school building. Okay. You entered the track and field area off of Bartlett Road, and it was well groomed and beautiful, and people went there with picnic baskets and all kinds of things when they were having track meets and so forth. Big deal.
So since you live next door and a lot of the staff lived on campus,
yeah.
Would you you'd see them around town, or would they ever come to your house or anything like that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. They weren't isolated at all. They were very much an integrated part of the Dalton community. The post office, the grocery stores, and that sort of thing. And fortunately, we I don't know what year it was, but we opened a grocery store there. So a fair amount of, I think it's called Wilson Grocery Store or something like that, and a fair amount of the commercial trade and that sort of thing was done at our grocery store with the people that lived there. And that was actually not only faculty that lived there on campus, but a few students also lived there. And how you got chosen to live there, I have no idea, but there was a few students in the dorms. They had dorms, and but a lot of the that was real housing for the upper echelon, but then there were dorms for the lower, newer faculties, I guess, or whatever they were. And then some of the faculty also commuted on the buses. For example, there was teachers that lived in Triplet that commuted on a bus when the bus came through Triplet, and then Keatsville, there was folks who lived in Keatsville that also taught there that commuted on the bus as well. So
so they rode, there was a bus driver and they rode. They didn't drive the bus and teach.
No, they didn't. No,
they just
the buses were driven mostly by the guys who ended up doing work around the farm and that sort of thing. But no, the teachers did not drive the buses, I recall. I don't believe it was. Yeah.
So were you involved at all with any of the farming that they were doing around the school since you
No,
were right there? No.
Just as an observer.
Okay.
My father and I, of course, we lived right next door to them. We did know what was going on, but we weren't engaged in any of the farming as such. Much of the farming during that time, and I don't believe they had a tractor. I believe it was all still done by horses and that sort of thing. They may have, but I can't recall having a tractor there.
Was your dad using a tractor at that time?
Oh yeah,
For his farm? And
yeah,
he was.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We even when we
Yeah.
lived out on the county farm, we had a tractor.
Okay.
I remember my dad. Don't remember, but I remember the stories of my dad during the Depression, and when things were rationing. He made a sort of a little trailer attached to his tractor and drove into town and got sugar and staples and that sort of thing. 'Cause out near the county farm or in that area was a big settlement of African American people out in the hills there. And so he would, when it was real inclement weather and that sort of thing, he would take his tractor and drive down to Dalton or wherever the depot was for picking up the rations and bringing them back out to people out in the hills, so to speak. Yeah.
Oh, that's
So
neat.
yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Mhm.
Well, I was going to say, tell me who your family is. So-
Well, my dad is Oscar Wilson. Dad grew up in the Namrash area. He had, I think, let's see, 3 brothers and I believe 2 sisters, maybe 4 brothers and 2 sisters. They had their home house was right near where the Sheridan and the Missouri kind of come together there, and there's in the Namrash area, and there was a big settlement of African American people in that Namrash area. As a matter of fact, I understand the church that is still there in Dalton, the original church was taken from Namrash and brought up to Dalton. People kind of left there because of the flooding. It flooded quite often, and from what I understand, the river changed its course somewhere in, I forget what year, but the river was a lot higher up from what the Missouri River was. The Missouri or the Grand? I believe it was called Keithsville Landing, as I recall.
Okay.
I recall reading.
Yeah,
I
sure.
wasn't there, but
Yeah.
obviously, and it routed itself more farther south, and I think that kind of caused the Namrash to be flooded more often than it had been. So many of the families that were there migrated to higher ground, and that was in Dalton, and some went to Keatsville and different areas of that nature.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Did you ever hear about how that area got named Namrash?
no, I have no idea.
Yeah.
None whatsoever.
Okay.
And the question comes up about why was there such a migration of African American people to that area, and I have no idea why that was. There's stories about Missouri being a big hemp producer, and laborers, enslaved people were brought in to do that. So I don't know. And tobacco, there was a substantial amount of tobacco grown there, and labor intensive. But I don't recall any stories of cotton being grown there or anything of that nature.
Okay. Okay. And then do you have siblings?
Yeah,
Okay.
I have. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's
My dad grew up there, and my mom was her maiden name is Fristo, and they grew up in that area as well. More in Dalton than I don't think they ever lived in the Namrash area, but around Dalton. My dad was a railroad man, and he lived in Detroit, and for whatever reason he decided to, I think his wife died, he was married earlier, his wife died, and for whatever reason, and I think his mom, her husband died. So anyway, I think he moved back to Dalton, and him and his 2 brothers, kind of Roscoe and Bill Wilson, bought a place for his mom and sister in Brookfield, and they moved him there. But digressing back, Dad ended up, for how they met, I don't know, but married my mom, there's a pretty big age difference between, I think mom was barely 17 when they got married. And then they stayed there in that area. Um,
What was your mom's first name?
Frances.
Frances
Frisco.
Okay.
And she had about 5 brothers and 3 sisters. She was the second oldest of the group, and they grew up and spent most of their time out in the hills near where the old county farm was. Their home place was just adjacent or butted up against the land that we farmed for whomever it was that owned it back in that day. And we could walk through the back gates and that sort of thing to Grandpa and Grandma's house. And let's see, what were we at there?
Well, how many children did your parents have then?
Mom, Dad, we have three kids.
Okay.
Myself and 2 sisters, and we were 4 years apart. My younger sister is 8 years younger than me, and my younger next to me, Jill Hughes, married Donald Hughes, is 4 years younger. And Sheila McDonald Madden is 8 years younger than me.
Okay.
And
so, did you help your dad with the farming at all?
I started to, I guess when I was 12 years old, going to the field with my dad. He'd give me the slowest tractor that we had, the safest tractor, and I would work most days with him after school was out and that sort of thing, and putting in crops and that sort of thing. And we also did a lot of custom hay baling around Missouri, and all even as far up as Mike and north of Dalton and that sort of thing. And we pulled this old baler all over the country, baling hay and so forth. And we raised corn and beans and wheat and hay, of course. We also raised cattle and hogs and so forth. I remember my first vehicle that I had owned was a result of having Dad giving me a couple of hogs, and I was able to raise them and accrue some money to buy a vehicle. They helped me buy it, but I had some input into it financially. Then pretty much as I grew older, Dad sort of allocated about 40 acres of land. Maybe it wasn't quite 40. It was about 35 acres that he paid for the seed, and we planted it, and I was supposed to take care of it. And that was where I got my spending money for, and that sort of thing. So we had, when my dad passed, we had probably 650 acres of land. Much of it was hilly and rough. That was about all the land that African American people could buy was kind of rough land during those times, and so we made a good living of it.
Good.
Dad and Mom Dad was one of these kind of entrepreneurs. And saying we had a grocery store, and we had a bar, and a couple different restaurants and so forth. And Dad was kind of to start it, and Mom was the glue that held it together. She took care of all of the finances and made sure everything was legal and taxes was paid and all that sort of thing.
So were those all at different times that or did you own some of those at the same time?
Yeah, we owned, we sold didn't sell it. We leased the grocery store to, I believe it was R.H. Robinson that was at the school. And his son, Sonny Robinson, ran the store. Okay. When Mom and Dad built the roadhouse or the restaurant out on our property out there, we quit running the downtown grocery store. And then when school was closed, I guess in '55 or whenever it was, um, the building sat there for a minute, and then they opened a 5% beer joint there, and went back to the front street there. And then most of my younger sister's time, they were sort of involved with the old restaurant. We sold sandwiches, meat, and products and that sort of thing. We had a big chopping block for meat and deli products, and along with beer and no whiskey, with just beer. All we had was beer, and a lot of the locals ran tabs. We still have a big box of these receipt books that when the wintertime came around and people were low on cash, that we ran a bill for them until they got back to work during the summertime, where they were farming and that sort of thing, and then they paid them off, and some didn't pay them off.
I was gonna say, yeah.
So that was quite a time.
Yeah. Now, is that bar the nightclub that you talked about, or is the nightclub something different?
The one downtown was the farthest building west of the post office. And it was a white building, and you'll see it in some photos of that area. But it was just a white brick building that was at the far end of the front street, I guess you might call it. And the nightclub, as I would call it, which was just open on Saturday and Sunday, was out on the farm place.
Okay. Okay. And that you own that. Your
Yeah.
family owned that.
Yeah,
Okay.
the old building's still there. I've turned it into a machine shed.
Oh, neat.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then for elementary school,
Yeah.
you went to school there in Dalton?
Yeah, went to elementary school at Phyllis Wheatley grade school from the first through 7. The 8th grade is when we integrated schools. Then I moved to Keatsville. We came to school in Keatsville. But yeah, even when and as I recall, we had one teacher for 4 grades, 1 through 4, and then 5 through 8, and it was in a 2-room school building. There was another room there that we used sort of as a auxiliary room, and then we had a little library, and but sometimes we were able to get through some of our lessons, and sometimes we weren't, because of depending upon the dialogue that happened. And having 4 grades in one room, sometimes issues came up.
Right. Right.
I remember quite well that we had a coal house out there, and we brought in coal and built a fire and all that sort of thing, and the stoves that were in both grades. Outdoor toilets, of course, and had one pump out there. We lined up every day, I think even during the wintertime, and said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And back in those days, for whatever reason, I don't know where it changed, but we never let the rain hit the flag. If it started raining, we'd go out there and pull that flag down and bring it in, fold it up. I see flags still flying now with even during the rain, but for whatever reason, we never did. We had to hustle out there and do that. But we had no basketball courts or anything. We had baseball primarily, but softball really is what we primarily had for our outdoor activities, and then hide and go see and stuff like that. I remember most of the baseball and baseball bats and basketballs and stuff like that were sort of hand me down from the white schools and so forth. And same with a lot of our books and stuff were sort of recycled, if you will. The library was pretty skimpy in terms of literature. We did have encyclopedias and that sort of thing, but there was a series of David Crockett and those series of books and that sort of thing. But I had no idea that there were African American writers until I got to junior college, and so we didn't have any literature there that was
Right.
written by African American people. Didn't know anything about them. We had the Huck Finn deals and stuff like that, but yeah.
Did you know at that time that you had hand-me-down books and bats and balls from the white school, or did you not learn that until later?
No, I knew they were used.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Did it affect you in
it
any
didn't.
way?
You know,
or
you
it
don't
was
miss
okay
what
at
you
the time?
never had, so to speak. You know, and you know, it was. Yeah, it's kind of amazing how the whole separate but equal kind of thing. Again, it's sort of like you don't miss what you never had, and because there was such a great numbers of African American people in the Dalton community, we had sort of I don't know what you call it, a big social environment that we never felt isolated. We felt inclusion. We felt empowered to some degree. And I didn't feel, I'm saying empowered, but because of today looking back, but during that time, we didn't feel like we were cheated any because we had the school there. We had the teachers there. We had the pastors, and then we had people who worked the railroad who came back and talked about life outside of Dalton and that sort of thing. We had a number of people who left Dalton and went to Kansas City, but would come back and would, you know, kind of bring us up to date as to what was going on with the black baseball teams and things this nature. And it's a funny kind of holistic culture that we had there.
Yeah.
That it was all inclusive, all capitalized, so in that community, and it was the best of times. I think it was really the best of times.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Never experienced much of discrimination until, of course, we went outside of the that little oyster that we sort of lived in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, you know, we've heard stories of people being hung or shot and things of this nature, but it wasn't one of those everyday kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Are you okay? Are you too cold?
No, I'm fine.
You're doing okay.
I won't
okay.
make it.
Okay. Back to Phyllis Wheatley. Did you eat your lunch there? Did they
Yeah.
provide your lunch,
No,
or you had to bring it?
we had to bring
Okay.
it. Yeah,
Okay.
dinner
And
buckets.
so everybody.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
We yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And Phyllis Wheatley was all students that lived around Dalton area.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Dalton area, out in the country, out in the hills, and down in the bottom, and you know, down near Namrash, and it's almost all the way down to Missouri River. We bussed them
So
in.
you had buses.
As I was alluding to earlier, the one of the professors at the Dalton Vocational High School was actually one of the bus drivers that picked us up and drove us into the schools and took us back every day and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But yeah, my you were asking about my family. My sisters were more enlightened than I, because of media, television, and different things of this nature. It brought sort of the rest of the world into our I remember getting our first television. My cousin was a radio and TV guy, and he made sure we had the best of what we could afford. And I remember we had three stations. We had Channel 8, Channel 13, and Channel 5. Channel 5 was Kansas City, and Jefferson City was 13, and 8 was Columbia. And we had this little rotary antenna that you could press a button and it would point toward Kansas City or St. Louis or Kansas City or whatever. Yeah.
So your sisters watched more TV than you did?
Yeah,
Because you were out helping your dad?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And then it was more available. We didn't have a TV probably until, and I was probably 10 years old before we got TV, and it was. But my younger sisters and so forth.
It was her whole life.
Yeah, pretty much her whole life. Yeah. I remember we having a party line, and we had a lady there that knew as much about our business as and sometimes she couldn't help it, but she would butt in our conversations even. And it was a funny thing. We lived quarter mile north of town, and many of the families in town didn't have phones and that sort of thing, so they would come out to our house and use the phone and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's neat. Yeah.
Or we'd have phone calls in from places, and we had to run downtown and let somebody know that there was a problem with issues and things of this nature. I remember one of the when Mom bought the house out there, it still had the outdoor plumbing, and one of the biggest deals that impressed me about my father and his brothers was Uncle Bill and Dad pretty much dug a basement under the house that was already there, using horses and that sort of thing as the method of digging it out, put in the plumbing. And I remember us going to Montgomery Ward's and buying the bathtub and sink and the toilet stools and that sort of thing. And I don't know how they knew about all that, but they installed all that, built the basement, poured the concrete and all that sort of thing back in the day. And we had indoor bathrooms before we did in the school, the grade school.
Yeah.
And I remember making sure I had my business taken care of before I went to school. So that was one of the big engineering feats I felt that my dad and his brothers and some of the professors from the school helped with that whole project. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Were you one of the first families in Dalton to have it back then?
Yeah, we were.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's something.
Now, I say Dad was pretty much of a entrepreneur in that aspect, and Mom was the glue that held it together.
Yeah.
But he would get out there and do whatever.
Yeah.
He also owned a baseball team at one time, and we used to go from Dalton to Moberly in back of a cattle truck with the hay bales in it, with the team in there, and we'd play down at I didn't play, but the team played in Moberly and Slater and different places like that, and we hauled the team, and we had a tarp over the cattle truck and so forth. We also took when the state fair came about, we also took loads of people down the state fair in the back of the truck.
Really?
Yeah. They'd pack lunches and all that sort of thing, and jam in that thing and head down to Sedalia.
Well, that's fun.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was. It was
yeah.
really good. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So eighth grade is when you
Went to the
integrated into
integrated. Yeah.
Keatsville.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
They it was a pretty different experience for us. Uh, we had I think it was probably 4 years prior to that was when the high school was integrated. So it started with the high school, and then it was the grade school subsequent to high school. I don't know why they chose it that way, but that's the way they did. But as I have said many times, it wasn't integration; it was assimilation. We were required to uh, basically take on another culture on another dimension without much of consideration for our lack of understanding or lack of you know being how you say conditioned for the new environment that we were living in. And unfortunately, none of the African American faculty was integrated into the school system. So they either had to leave the industry or move to places south or wherever in order to get employment. They weren't even brought in as consultants or anything of that nature in this process. So it was probably a good 4 or 5 years after the integration process before a Dalton male African American graduated. They either gave up or they were expelled or something because of their inability to acclimate, if you will. And so that was really a real kind of a tragic way of causing that thing to happen. It was good on one side, but there weren't any racial blow-ups or like we find in our history in Arkansas and Alabama and places like that. It was just a subtleness of the difference in culture rather than the problems that we find in the deep South, so to speak.
Do you remember your very first day going to Keatsville?
Well, yeah, I do. I remember not only the very first day, but I remember in the 7th grade, that was, how you say, introduce your new coming students. And so we kind of were brought in, and that was, I don't know how they did it, but we shared a desk with one of the other the students that were already there, and we had the wide chairs, or desk chairs, I guess you call them, or whatever. So we shared, and we kind of developed friendship, if you will, that carried on to the 8th grade when we were integrated, and it was still sort of, we still sat together, African American kids sat together in a row, largely to the back of the room, unless you were alphabetically placed, and you went by your alphabet. But if it was given an opportunity of choosing where you wanted to sit, you usually sat in the same row. Same way with study hall, you sat at the same table, or you sat at the same table when you had lunch, that sort of thing. So, I mean, that was pretty much the routine. We played sports, and sports was really a good way of kind of normalizing. If you were a good athlete and you kind of got along and that sort of thing, it was. I mean, we created some real good friendships and that sort of thing. I'm not implying it was all negative. It was just stressful.
Sure.
And we had some wonderful friends that were white students and that sort of thing, and friendships that we have today
Yeah.
as a result of that period of time.
Yeah. Could you tell did you notice any difference? Were the students more accepting than the staff? Or was it about
More accepting.
accepting of the integration? Were the white students more accepting than the white staff?
I felt that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would
yeah,
assume is
yeah,
that
I
the
felt
kids
that
would
way.
accept it better
Yeah,
than yeah.
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 There was some staff that was just not very
Yeah.
understanding, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the most of the kids were not
Yeah.
not that bad. Well, there'd be one
Yeah.
or two maybe,
Yeah,
but
sure.
you knew who they were.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
the same ones that feel that way today.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
if they're
Right.
still living.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Huh.
Mhm.
Okay. So then you took a bus to Keatsville.
Yeah.
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 We it was and again it was a bus that came to Dalton, and I lived out there in the country, picked me up and bring me down, and most of the kids came down right at the post office, the old post office that was there, and got on the bus and went back to Keatsville and back and forth. Because of the number of African American students, the bus was almost full, and so there wasn't any white kids with us on that bus,
Really?
but there were a couple buses where other kids that lived elsewhere outside of Dalton, and farm kids that were integrated buses, and so
So there weren't really many white kids that lived in Dalton.
not
when
in
you
the
were a
town,
kid.
not in the
Okay.
town.
Okay.
I expect there may have been 30, 35 black ones, and maybe 7 or 8 white kids that lived there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then you graduated from Keatsville.
Yeah, graduated
Okay.
in Keatsville.
Okay.
And
what did you do after graduation?
it was, for me, it was kind of a challenge. I probably, and there was some dialogue about me perhaps repeating the 8th grade. Again, I was sort of behind, kind of based upon how much more time the teachers were being able to spend with the, one classroom full of students versus the 4 class students. And also my age. I think I was a little immature for my age. I started school really when I was 5. And so I had some challenges in the even in the grade school, finishing the junior high, and I got better as time progressed, and then graduated in 1963, and tried to decide upon what I was going to do with the rest of my life, and the counseling wasn't really very good for us. As I recall, it wasn't really a counselor, but I think it was assistant principal or something, talked to me about my options and whatever. And one of my biggest options were, he suggested go to Body and Fender School in Kansas City and take a trade school kind of affair. And I kind of looked at my mom, and she looked at me, and said, that's really not the kind of thing I was really hoping for. So anyway, we decided, Mom and I, that we'd try at Mobley Junior College. And we went down to Mobley Junior College, and we sat there and talked to the superintendent, or I guess you'd call him, I think he was superintendent, about my options and that sort of thing. And they allowed me to start there on probation, sort of. And I guess my chronological and physical age kind of caught up a little bit. My freshman year, I kind of grew about 6 inches taller, and then I began to rationalize and make decisions better. And so my first semester, uh, I did pretty good. And I saw other students there that didn't do as good as I did and so forth. And I began to develop this inner feeling of, yes, I can, or, and so from then on, it got better and better and better. And I remember one of the few A's I got there was in algebra. And I just, because the professor was good, and I was clicking there. And one of my literature teacher was from Czechoslovakia, and she insisted on myself and several of the African American basketball players reading books written by African American writers, James Baldwin and Langston Hughes, and to I hadn't, maybe they, because they were from St. Louis and different places like that, they may have known about them. I didn't know anything about them. And so I began to take on a different perspective about the world and the world around us, and things just sort of blossomed from then. I graduated, and then the next phase of life was to what was I going to do to finish and get my bachelor's degree. And a couple of basketball players that I was friends with had decided to go to Drake and Des Moines, and we had relatives in Des Moines, and so I said, "Doggone it, we may try to do that." Well, meantime, during the summertime, they decided to go to Michigan State, and I had already decided to go to Des Moines. But what I did do was, instead of going right straight to Drake, I went to a IBM trade school and picked up computer programming. Well, it wasn't really computer programming back in those days. It was actually a wiring of computers and that sort of things, were sorters and accounting machines and key punch machines and all that sort of thing. Did extremely well. I graduated really high in my class there, and sort of picked up some more momentum, success momentum. The success barometer was really building in my life. And while I was there, I needed a part-time job, so jobs that were coming up was either bus boys or janitors and stuff like that. And I was a janitor for a while at Methodist Hospital, and I went to the Youth Opportunity Employment Center and said, I've got 2 years of college. I ought to be able to get something other than a bus boy and the guy hummed and hawed a little bit, and this was in 65, I think it was, 65, yes, 65, 66 maybe, 65. And he said, just a minute. I've got a microfilming job at Mercy Hospital, part-time, pays $1.25 an hour. With your 2 years of college, you might be able to get $1.50. I went there and interviewed, and the director of the medical record department hired me and just kind of took me under the wings. Her name was Mrs. Miller, and I worked there as and did real good production for her, probably 3 or 4 hours a day. And she came to me one day and she said, "Sam, they are about to put a computer in here, and if you'd want, I'd go out and talk to the controller for you, and maybe perhaps you can start working down there part-time and work up here part-time." So she went down and talked to the controller. They brought me on part-time there and part-time in the area. The computer wasn't even there during that time. We were doing stuff with processing payroll and that sort of thing was a grocery wholesale place. We packed up data cards and all that sort of thing. We'd drive out to this wholesale company, and we would at night and process the payroll and that sort of thing. In the meantime, we were converting from posting machines to computer, and then we installed the computer. And so I still was working part-time both places. Then pretty soon I cut over to full-time in the business office, and we started the computer department at Mercy Hospital in Des Moines, probably in 1966, I think it was. And I stayed there until 1985, and I rose up to be the director of the computer department for Mercy Hospital, and was sort of transferred to a hospital in Denver as vice president for computer information systems, in which I had responsibility for their telephone systems, the medical record department, and the medical where the liaison between the doctors. I don't know exactly what it was, but what they call it, medical staff office and that sort of thing. So I worked there for a number of years, and then sort of the rest is history. I stayed in healthcare administration for the remainder of my professional career.
So did you go to Drake while you
you
were working part-time there?
Yeah,
Okay.
what happened there, when I started working full-time at the hospital, they paid my tuition. So I could go sometimes I took 3 hours, and sometimes I took 6, sometimes I took 9, depending upon the subject. And by the time I borrowed the money from the credit union, and then I graduated I graduated, but I turned my scores in successfully, and then they paid me back my tuition reimbursement. And so I ended up graduating eventually from Drake with a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration. Wow. But having had that, but then I had 10 years or so of practical experience at the same time. Yeah.
That worked out great.
Yeah. It was like, how could it happen this way, you know?
Yeah. Wow. So did you meet Lowell? Did you know Lowell before all of that? Okay.
Yeah,
and then he just happened to work for IBM also.
Yeah, he did. I never worked for IBM though.
Just took
I used IBM training and then IBM equipment, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But I knew Lowell in school, in high school, and he was behind me, so I didn't really play against him or with him. But his mother and father and his Aunt Jessie were real good friends of my family, and so it was we knew the Newsoms really well.
Okay. Well, wow, that's a cool story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Are there other things that you wanted to talk about while we're here recording, or?
I don't know if there's anything else. I've sort of talked about the school there a little bit, and sort of life in Dalton, the pride of Dalton, and why I'm still proud about Dalton, even though there's not much there left.
Yeah.
Of course, we still have the 47 acres, which we probably always have. We sold, some of it to help my mom with her retirement and that sort of thing. And then we also, profited some from some of the land that was sold. Looking back, I wish we hadn't, but that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you do anything with it now? Is it farmed or anything?
Yeah, we cash rent it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I have a niece that moved there. She lives there on the farm, and my nephews and so forth go up and shoot guns and enjoy the farm.
Yeah.
When I came back here initially, I bought a tractor and so forth and kind of kept the weeds down and everything. Hopefully, my niece is going to do the same. I noticed that they had a zero turn, and hopefully they're going to keep the
Yeah.
grass down. My sister is likely. She's trying to fix up the old house. I think it's a kind of a losing battle, but don't put that on the. But she's dead set on trying to rehab the old house,
Yeah.
and I think when she retires, she may move back there. She
Neat.
just kind of got it in her blood,
Yeah.
and she drives all the way from Springfield, Illinois, down, and all throughout the time, back and forth,
Yeah.
and that's her daughter that lives there.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
we'll probably never sell it. I guess the main issue would be how do we keep peace in the valley when one group might want to do this and one group might want to do that.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
just have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, any other memories you can think about, Dalton, about growing up there? Anything you'd like to share?
Well, it's just again, I the baseball team and stuff like that on Sundays. It'd be a big day. There'd be a team coming in or whatever, and my mom. And it was one of those kind of situations where it seemed like the Wilson kids always had to work. There'd be fun things going on, but like my mom would have hot dog stands set up and stuff like that, and we had to help set it up. We had to help. It was always the holidays and that sort of thing. Was always we had to work. Like if we'd have a dance on Saturday night, had to get up early in the morning, go down, clean up, wipe the tables off, get everything stocked and ready for Sunday. And it was just one of those kind of environments that it just a total entrepreneurial environment. Either I was working on the farm, I was working on the businesses, or we were doing something.
Yeah.
And it was kind of pleasant to have gotten away from that.
Yeah. Yes.
And when I was moved to Des Moines, it was like a whole different world. One of the things that I remember most is it was raining one time, and I realized, daggone, I don't have mud on my feet. I hit streets and stuff like that. Oh my! And there was some other kids that were there, and they had umbrellas and stuff, So I even bought an. I never had an umbrella before, and so I bought an umbrella, and it was myself. I shared a apartment with upstairs over. When I moved to Des Moines, we had a cousin that lived there in Des Moines. So Mom and Mom was always my road buddy. We went there, and her name was Margaret Carson. She was from Gillum, and she lived up there a good while. And she had she boarded students from Drake. And again, it was still segregated to a point up there, even though it was not quite as overt. But there were certain areas that you just couldn't rent an apartment in. And so anyway, I didn't have to deal with that because Margaret had one. And so, but the thing about it is, she said, now they call my mom Duke. Duke, I'm going to keep an eye on him. Man, I tell you, she kept an eye on me. She knew when I was coming. She knew when I was going. It was like having Mom all over again. And a couple times I snuck a girl in my apartment, and she told Mom about that. And man, it was just kind of like. So it was. It was like I can't get away from my family. which was you know, was kind of
Yeah.
good, you know.
Yeah.
And so I got acclimated pretty much to Des Moines. But one of the things I did leave out of the scenario was uh, back when I was working full time at Mercy. The draft board at Keysville told my mom that if I didn't get back in school full time, they were going to have to classify me as 1A again. And I had the 2S deferment, or whatever you call it, for student. And so I told I tried to get into the reserves, National Guard, and a whole bunch of stuff, you know, and couldn't make a move. Everybody was full up. So I told my boss there at Mercy that, you know, I may get drafted. He says, we can work on that. So one day I was in the office there, and two guys came in from IBM, and they both were officers at the Iowa National Guard, the Army National Guard. They came in and talked to me, and they said, if you'd be interested in joining our group, but one of the stipulations is, if you join us, you're going to have to go to officer candidate school. And so I said, well, you know, rather than going to Vietnam, yeah,
Yeah.
So, at any rate, 2 weeks later, I was signing up, became a part of the Army Iowa National Guard. And then I went to basic and AIT. I went to basic in Fort Polk and Louisiana, and then I had an MOS of field medic, 91 B10, 91 ambulance driver, so forth and so on. Went to San Antonio for AIT, then came back to Des Moines, and that's when I didn't go back to my cousins. I got myself an apartment across town. It so happened that, again, one of those serendipity kind of things, a lady that worked in the dietary department there at Mercy, I don't know how I found out about it, but she had apartments that she rented out. Got me a nice apartment right across from the dorms at Drake. And that started my emancipation from my family, so to speak. Oh my gosh. The other thing is, I don't know when I got a phone, but you know, I just never had a phone, you know, and so, you know, once I got the other apartment and so forth, I finally got a phone and
So
bank
they could
account.
still call you.
And that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my emancipation from the families when I got back from active duty. Yeah. Then I served, and whatever reason, I don't know whether the people that had brought me into the National Guard got transferred or whatever, but they never required me to go to an officer candidate school. And looking back, I wish I had, but I ended up being promoted up to staff sergeant, and staff sergeant, and did the 6 years, and then got out.
Yeah. Huh. Well, that's quite a
One
story.
of the tense things, and you only put that in there, one of the tense things about being in the Iowa National Guard is during that period of time, there was quite a bit of rioting going on, and I had to go down to the same neighborhoods that I'd go and get a haircut in.
Really?
With a uniform on.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that made it a little tense there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah.
So it wasn't but one, I was the only African American in the whole battalion of.
Really?
Mhm.
Huh.
Except for the people who were returning from Vietnam, have active duty, and sometimes they had to serve out a few, but in terms of being Iowa National Guard, that wasn't one besides me.
Wow.
Mhm.
Huh.
And that I don't know. That time I got out, there 6 years later, I think I was still the only one. Maybe there was one or two other ones. Yeah.
Wow.
But there was hundreds of people.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
it's a funny world, how sort of God has a way of directing. You make your plans, but God plans the route or whatever it is.
That's right. Yeah. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Huh. Wow. Well, Sam,
So
I think
that's
go
my
ahead.
whole story, and
Yeah.
I don't know how you're gonna piece that together, but
We'll do it though.
Yeah.
This was an excellent interview.
Was it
Thank you
really good?
I thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah. You did a really good job, and I'm really glad we got it done while you were here.
okay.
So
All right.
yeah.
Well,
And if
perfect.
there's more, if you think of more later, we can
Oh, there's
always...
a lot more, but I don't know if
Yeah.
I could piece it together.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I quit while I'm
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay.
The other neat thing though, my sisters, man, I was just so proud of them. My sister Jill, yeah, I'd like to take a little bit of credit from having the initial exposure to certain things out there,
Yeah.
like, their classes and, study habits, and what I did not do a good job of, they did a much better job of than me. Jill had tremendous grades. She was just the neatest person that could ever walk. She's very extremely successful at not only in the high school, but as she went to Kirksville and then her teaching engagements and all that sort of thing. Doing her master's, as a matter of fact, she probably could have gotten her PhD. I think she didn't do it because family kind of things, whatever. And my younger sister, Sheila, did extremely well also. She's got her, I don't know if she got a master's. Yeah, she probably does have a master's, but speech pathology and that sort of thing. But they were just much better students than I was.
And Sheila is still living?
Yeah,
Yeah,
she
is.
lives in
Okay.
Springfield,
Okay.
Illinois.
Oh, that's right.
the
You
one
said
that.
that. She comes back and forth. Yeah. Okay.
And she's cut from a different cloth.
Okay. Yeah. Let me turn